Well, as journalists, we're exposed to different kinds of situations on the field. We cover devastating stories such as talking to families who've lost loved ones, to horrible crimes, and interview COVID-19 patients and survivors as well, and find ourselves in the middle of protests like we see happening outside in Kandla at the moment. Some journalists are even bullied when trying to make sense of it all. All of this can affect one's mental well-being. Well, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group and the South African National Editors Forum are partnering to help journalists with mental health support and to prioritize journalism wellness in newsrooms across the country. Let's discuss this now with SADAG's Cassey Chambers. Cassey, good afternoon, and thanks so much for your time. And tell us a little bit more about this partnership with Sanef, between Sanef and SADAG, and how it's actually going to work. How do you make yourselves accessible to journalists in the middle of all of this, where the need from the general public is so great?
Absolutely, and I think, SADAG have worked so closely with press and media over the last 27 years, and normally it's because they're supporting our work and helping us to create awareness and educate the public, and we've even hosted press workshops. But over the years, and especially in the last year since we've dealt with COVID and lockdown, we've been getting so many more reports and so many more journalists and press and media that we work with reaching out saying they're not coping, they're really stressed and overworked and burnt out. And we were also getting requests from news editors saying, what do we do? How do we help? So it was a very natural partnership for us to partner with Sanef, who are really concerned about the mental health of the journalists that they're working with. So we then went ahead and launched a dedicated SMS providing free telephone counseling to journalists and anyone working in the press and media field to offer them help for their own mental health, especially during this time and beyond. Yeah. The mental health of journalists was important before COVID. And I think just as you mentioned now, with all these extra stresses, it's just made it even that more difficult to cope alone. And that's important for us as SADAG, to give back to the journalists who have helped us so much in providing them free care.
And Cassey, journalists are seen as people who are sort of, I don't know, whether, they know that we're actually human and, or whether people think that we could just go on and we have really, really thick skins. But we do take a lot of abuse on the job as well. I mean, I'm just looking at my Twitter feed after the interview I just had, or any of the Zuma-related interviews, just to make an example of it. I mean, people say the nastiest things, but we're expected to carry on. We're seen as these tough guys, when all we want to do is just make some sense out of situations. So I think that's the other side of this, is having to sort of make journalists themselves realize that you are human. You are allowed to actually, talk about your feelings after all of this. You don't take sides while you're doing a story, yes, of course, but you also, there are questions, there are things. You represent the ordinary person out there who needs to make sense of what is happening in their world.
Exactly, and I think for so long, journalists have worked longer, harder on those tough cases. When there's a fire or a horrific scene, the rest of us run away, whereas journalists have to run and go and report on it, and especially during COVID. They've worked longer and harder, as you know, to cover the stories, and a lot of it is really heavy and really sad. And this is their normal. This is their reality every single day. But we forget that they're also people too. And it has an impact. It has an emotional impact. When you're doing those stories and you're hearing those stories and you're putting a face and a voice to these horrific stories that are happening every single day, it's very hard to shut the door and ignore it. And I think this is where we are at the moment, is that it starts to impact their mental wellness, their relationships, how they're coping on a daily basis. And this is why it's important that we come in and step up and say, hey, we want to make this a priority. We want to offer support. And it's not just about providing counseling, but we also want to change the system. We know that it's very normal. There's that culture of working incredibly long hours, very stressful, under time deadlines. But you also need support, and you're needing help in those places too. And this is what we're hoping to do, is to change that culture, that environment, to offer more support, so that when someone does need help, they know who to turn to and people know what to do.
And of course, it's just a matter of time. I mean, you can deal with the mental and emotional effects of it. There is a point where it actually manifests in a physical form.
Absolutely. Your mental health changes the way that your body functions. It changes the chemicals in your body. So you're going to see physical symptoms such as just change in sleeping habits, change in eating habits, more headaches, back problems, even more vulnerability to illnesses. And this is why it's really important that we help journalists also realize that they're human too, and help them to make mental health a priority. before it turns into something more severe, where maybe they have to take time off work, or it affects relationships, or it even has an effect on their financial status. So it's important that we make it a priority and to teach journalists how to look after their mental health as well.
And I think you also need to start teaching the bosses as well, Cassey, don't you think so? I mean, we have some unrealistic expectations sometimes when it comes to news. It's like, this is the job you signed up for, this is the story, it's going to take days, the conditions are dangerous, yes, but are we also working to change that? And we understand it is the nature of the job. And it's not just journalists, we have crew members as well. People who are up from very early in the morning, they're here till very late at night. I mean, there also needs to be, I suppose, some kind of understanding, some kind of give and take when it comes to not just those who are on the ground, but those who give the orders for them to be on the ground.
Exactly, and I think this is why this partnership with Sanef was so important, is that we're wanting to provide help to the journalists, but we also want to train up managers and team leaders and editors on how to deal with mental health, what to say, what not to say, and how to get help. You know, we're teaching them some basic skills. We're actually hosting a webinar series on various mental health topics specific to the press and media and journalist field. It's not just a one-size-fits-all, but we're also wanting to train up editors so that they know what to say, how to identify the signs and symptoms, so that they can also be part of the solution and hopefully the preventative solution. If we can pick up the signs and symptoms early on and get intervention and get help, we can actually prevent some of the more severe burnouts, depression, PTSD. So this is going to take a whole village, and this is why we're approaching and supporting everyone during this.
All right, so who can access this? How do we access it? Is there a different number, a different line, a different red telephone that's waiting for journalists to actually call you?
It is. We have a dedicated special number, so you don't have to call any of the other SADAG numbers and get through. We're wanting to have a very specialized counselors available to really understand what journalists are dealing with on a daily basis. So we've put in our own support program and training. We have a dedicated SMS number. So any journalist, any cameraman, copy editor, crew member, just like you mentioned, if anyone needs help, they can reach out and SMS us on 31985, and a counselor will call them back. They don't even have to use their phones or their airtimes or anything. They can SMS and we will call them back. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we're really just wanting to provide them as much help and support as possible. What we're also doing, and this is open to every newsroom editor, every team leader or manager, is we're hosting a training in partnership with Sanef next week, Saturday, the 10th of July, really looking at mental health in the workplace, teaching those key skills and really unpacking a lot of what we need to do to be looking after journalists and giving that information and tools. So please go have a look on the Sanef website or the SADAG website, and you can register for that training the 10th of July from 9 to 12.
And I think also a lot of those people, the journalists, the crew members as well, Cassey, would be wanting to know that this is something that stays confidential. It's not something that might end up back on the boss's desk where it's okay, this person is actually not able to work and isn't of any value to you at the moment. I mean, just some reassurance there.
Absolutely, and this is something that SADAG, prides our reputation on, is that all of our counselling is strictly confidential. We don't need to know which newsroom you're from or where you are. The fact that you're reaching out, we just want to help you. So we don't share any of this information with any of the other news editors, with your boss or even with your colleagues. It's strictly confidential. You can even be anonymous if you want to. The most important thing is that you're reaching out and that you're getting help and that you don't feel alone. And that's what we're really wanting to just get the message out, and that reassurance is that we're really just there to care and look after you.